The HOA took over my lot without asking, so I towed every car and took down their president in front of the entire neighborhood. They flooded my business lot with unauthorized parking, blocked my deliveries, and ignored every warning I gave. So I documented everything, hired a tow crew, and exposed their lies in court and online. Their smear campaign backfired, the community turned, and their president was forced to resign. Now the lot is quiet, the signs are clear, and they know better than to mess with me again. My day kicked off like any other. Owning a modest logistics company meant my warehouse was more than just a building. It was the heart of everything I'd worked for. Tucked neatly at the far edge of a quiet suburban neighborhood, the warehouse and its large lot felt like my personal fortress. There was room for my employees to park, space for delivery trucks to move easily, and my own car had its usual spot near the entrance. Everything about it had always worked smoothly, which is why I was completely thrown off when I pulled into the lot that morning and saw a mess I wasn't prepared for. At first, I thought I was imagining things. Cars I didn't recognize were scattered all over the lot. SUVs, sedans, even a damn minivan were jammed into spaces marked private parking. A couple were so badly parked they were taking up more than one spot. My first instinct was that there must have been some event nearby, or maybe someone had needed a temporary place to stop during an emergency. But as I drove in further, it became painfully clear this wasn't some one-off situation. Every single spot was taken. Not a single space left for my staff or for incoming deliveries. One of our delivery trucks was stuck right at the entrance, idling awkwardly because it couldn't get through. My stomach tightened. I pulled up to the curb, got out, and started walking through the lot, checking out each vehicle. None of them had company tags, nothing that suggested they were here for business. But a few had stickers from that residential community next door, the one run by the homeowners association I'd barely ever interacted with. The warehouse had always been its own thing. I'd picked the location specifically to avoid the drama of residential zones. I liked the separation. I liked the quiet. That quiet was clearly over. I pulled out my phone and dialed my assistant, Emily, who was already inside. "Hey, Em, did someone give permission for anyone to park out here? Maybe there's an event or something going on?" I asked, trying not to snap. "Nope," she answered, just as confused. I was wondering the same thing. A couple of the guys already called me, saying they couldn't find a place to park. "We've got deliveries coming in all morning. What do you want me to do?" I sighed, trying to keep my irritation from boiling over. "Let me see what's going on. I'll call you back." With that, I ended the call and headed toward the community center for the neighborhood. It wasn't far, a 5-minute walk, tops. As I stepped into the area, I couldn't help noticing how well-maintained everything looked. Manicured flower beds, pristine sidewalks, and a level of polish that screamed, "We have a budget for this." Inside, a receptionist looked up from her desk and gave me a practiced smile, completely unaware of the headache I was walking in with. "Hi there," I said, trying to keep it polite. "I need to talk to someone in charge. There's a situation with the parking lot next to my warehouse." Her smile stiffened. "Of course, sir. Let me check if Mrs. Bennett, our HOA president, is available." A few minutes later, I was sitting across from a woman in her late 40s with a sharp bob and even sharper eyes. She had a kind of calm control about her that immediately made me suspicious. I explained the situation, how the entire lot was filled with vehicles clearly not tied to my business, how deliveries couldn't even get in, and how not a single person had bothered to ask for permission. She listened quietly, arms folded, expression unreadable. When I was done, she leaned back slightly. "I understand the frustration," she said, cool as a cucumber. "But we've been dealing with a parking issue in our community for months now. Your lot was almost always empty during the day. It seemed like a reasonable solution. So we let residents know they could use it temporarily." I blinked. "You let them know? You told people they could park in my lot without even asking me." "Well," she said, her voice firming up, "the HOA has the right to act in the interest of the community. Given your proximity to the neighborhood, it made logical sense." That did it. My hands clenched against the sides of the chair. "No. What you did was trespassing. You gave people access to private property that doesn't belong to you. I run a business. Trucks come and go all day. My employees rely on those spaces." Mrs. Bennett barely flinched. "We assumed you wouldn't mind, considering how underutilized the lot appeared." I stood up, jaw tight. "I do mind. I'm giving you 48 hours to get the word out and clear that lot. If you don't, I'll handle it myself." Her eyes narrowed. "Mr. Miller, I'd think twice before escalating. The HOA has influence, and we're operating well within our rights. "You're not," I said flatly, "and I'm going to prove it." Then I walked out without another word, pulse pounding, the kind of anger that doesn't just burn, it coils. I wasn't just mad. I was stunned. The nerve it took for them to decide my property was theirs to use? That wasn't just entitled. It was war. Walking back from that meeting with Mrs. Bennett, I could feel the heat rising in my chest. The kind of slow, simmering anger that sticks around long after the conversation ends. It wasn't just what she said, it was how casually she said it. Like she had every right to make that decision for me. Like my business, my property, my people didn't matter in the equation. By the time I got back to the warehouse, my delivery truck was still awkwardly idling near the gate, blocked in on all sides. My staff were wandering around trying to figure out where to park, looking at me like I had answers I didn't yet have. Emily came out of the front office the second she saw me. "Any luck?" she asked, arms folded, eyebrows raised. "You're not going to believe this," I said, shaking my head. The HOA just decided on their own that my lot would be perfect for their overflow parking problem. Didn't ask. Didn't notify. Just handed out permission slips like they owned the place. Her eyes widened. "You're kidding." "Wish I was," I muttered. "They've got 48 hours. After that, I'm towing every car in that lot." I already told Mrs. Bennett. Emily didn't even blink. "Good. This is ridiculous." I nodded and walked back inside, my boots echoing on the concrete floor as I headed for my office. Once I sat down, I pulled out my phone again. This time, I called my lawyer, Brian Jacobs. He wasn't just some fancy suit. I'd worked with him for years and trusted him to keep me out of trouble. When he picked up, I got straight to the point. "Hey, Brian, got a situation over here I need some advice on." I explained everything, how the HOA had taken it upon themselves to redirect their parking problems into my lot, how Mrs. Bennett had straight up admitted it without blinking, and how I gave them 48 hours to fix it. "So," I said, leaning back in my chair, "can I legally start towing if they don't clear out?" Brian was quiet for a beat, then said, "Absolutely. It's your property. As long as you posted proper signage and you document everything, they've got no legal footing. I'd even recommend snapping photos of the cars, their plates, the signs you put up, just in case this turns into something messy, eh? You're saying it probably will." I've dealt with enough HOAs to know they rarely back down quietly. That was comforting. After we hung up, I went into action mode. I printed out big, bold, "No parking, private property, violators will be towed" signs and got to work posting them around every entrance to the lot. I made sure they were clear, obvious, and couldn't be missed unless someone had their eyes closed. Then I walked the perimeter and snapped a photo of each one, plus wide shots of the lot for context. I wasn't taking any chances. That night, I barely slept. I kept tossing and turning, thinking about how casually Mrs. Bennett had dismissed me, how confident she was that her HOA had some magical authority that overrode common sense. I woke up before my alarm, groggy but wired, threw on a hoodie, and headed straight for the warehouse. More cars had shown up overnight. Some of them parked so badly they were practically kissing my loading dock. It was like they weren't just ignoring my signs, they were mocking me. That morning, I called Mrs. Bennett directly. She'd given me her card, and I had zero hesitation using it. The phone rang twice before she picked up. Her voice was as clipped as I remembered. "This is Mrs. Bennett." "It's Jake Miller," I said. I tried to keep my voice calm, but I could already hear the edge creeping in. "I haven't seen any progress. The cars are still in my lot. You haven't even sent out a notice or anything." There was a long pause. "Mr. Miller," she said coolly, as I explained, "we're dealing with a long-standing parking shortage. Your lot was available, and we informed residents they could use it temporarily." I gritted my teeth. "That's not your call to make. My employees can't park. My trucks can't unload. You're interfering with a business, and that's not a temporary inconvenience, that's trespassing." Her voice sharpened. "I'd advise you to reconsider your tone. The HOA is acting in the best interest of the community." I cut her off. "This isn't a negotiation. You've got until tomorrow morning. After that, I'm towing every last vehicle. Don't say I didn't warn you." And I hung up. I didn't wait for her response. I was done with polite conversations. I was done with being reasonable when no one else was. From that point forward, it was game on. After that phone call, there wasn't a shred of doubt left in my mind. These people weren't going to budge. Mrs. Bennett had practically dared me to act, speaking like she had some divine right to treat my property like public overflow. I stood there staring at my phone for a minute, fist clenched, trying to slow my breathing. I'd given her every chance to handle this the easy way, and she'd thrown it back in my face with a smile. So I spent the rest of the morning doing exactly what Brian had advised, documenting every inch of the situation like I was building a legal case, because I basically was. I walked the lot again, snapping photos of each car, making sure license plates were clear. I took wide shots of the lot showing the chaos, how deliveries couldn't even get in, how employees had nowhere to park. I filmed a video walking from the entrance to the back, pointing out the posted signs that every single driver had ignored. I even narrated it, making sure the time and date were obvious. That afternoon, a couple of residents walked by as I was filming. One of them, a woman in her 30s wearing yoga pants and holding a bag of groceries, smiled like we were neighbors or something. "Morning," she said cheerfully while loading her trunk. I gave a nod, tight-lipped, trying not to explode. She had no clue she was part of the problem, and honestly, that made it worse. How could someone treat someone else's private business like a public lot and still have the nerve to smile about it? By lunchtime, I'd had enough. I called a local towing company, laid out the situation in full detail, and made it clear I wasn't playing games. The dispatcher on the other end didn't even sound surprised. "We've dealt with HOAs trying to pull this kind of thing before," she said. "As long as you've got signage, proof, and ownership documentation, you're good to go. We'll be there first thing tomorrow." I hung up, feeling the first flicker of relief all day. It was short-lived. I still had to let my staff know what was coming. So I called everyone into the break room, about a dozen employees, most of them already frustrated from having to park down the street or show up late because they'd been circling the block. I stood at the front, feeling their eyes on me. "All right," I began, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "I've been more patient than I should have been." The HOA took advantage of that. "But starting tomorrow morning, we're taking our lot back. I've hired a towing company, and every unauthorized car in this lot is getting hauled out. Period." A few of them broke into applause. No joke, actual clapping. That's how fed up they were. Emily nodded from the side. "About time. You gave them every chance." I nodded back, but didn't smile. This wasn't some petty turf war. This was about protecting what I'd built. I didn't want to be that guy who has people's cars hauled off, but I wasn't going to let some overreaching HOA pretend they owned what I'd worked for. That evening, I walked the lot one last time to make sure all the signs were still in place and hadn't been messed with. I even added a few more for good measure, bright, bold letters warning that unauthorized vehicles would be towed at the owner's expense. As I rounded the far corner of the lot, I noticed a new SUV parked so crooked it was taking up 2 full spaces and partially blocking the loading bay. That was the final straw. That wasn't just inconsiderate, it was hostile. I stared at it for a moment, then pulled out my phone and snapped a photo. In that moment, any shred of guilt I had about towing those cars vanished. These people didn't care that they were messing with someone else's livelihood. They didn't care that my team was showing up early and still couldn't find a place to park. They didn't care that delivery trucks were backing up onto the street. All they cared about was convenience. Well, that convenience was ending tomorrow morning, and I was going to be there to watch every single one of those cars get hauled off with chains rattling and engines roaring. It wasn't about revenge, it was about setting a boundary. A very loud, very clear one. That night, I barely slept. I kept waking up every couple of hours thinking about those cars, that smug phone call with Mrs. Bennett, and the way she acted like I didn't have a say in any of this. By the time the sun started rising, I was already up and out the door, coffee in hand, boots on, and a folder of paperwork tucked under my arm. I wanted everything ready before the towing company arrived. First thing I did was walk the lot again, just to be sure nothing had changed overnight. Of course, it had. There were even more vehicles now. Some parked on the white lines, some blocking the loading zone. A couple practically sitting sideways like they just didn't care. It was so blatant at this point, it didn't feel like an accident. It felt like defiance. I took new pictures of every car. Same drill as the day before. License plates, wide shots, close-ups, even video of me pointing out how each vehicle violated the posted signs. I kept my voice calm in the recordings, even though I was boiling inside. I wasn't just documenting it for the lawyer anymore. I was doing it for myself, to remind me I wasn't crazy, that this situation really was as absurd as it felt. After that, I walked the perimeter of the lot and rechecked all the signs I'd installed. Most of them were still exactly where I'd put them, bright yellow and red, loud as hell. But one had been torn down. Not fallen, torn, like someone had walked up, yanked it off the pole, and tossed it aside. I picked it up, shook my head, and took a photo of it lying in the grass before putting it back up. this time with heavy-duty screws and extra zip ties. I wasn't taking chances. By mid-morning, I called Brian again to make sure every legal base was covered. "Morning," I said when he picked up, "just doing my due diligence here. Signs are posted, photos are taken, everything's documented. You still feel good about tomorrow?" "More than good," he said without missing a beat. "They're in the wrong, Jake. You've done everything by the book. If they try to fight you on this, they're going to lose, and they'll look dumb doing it. Just make sure the towing crew does it clean. No shortcuts, no cowboy moves. Already talked to the company. They're pros. Then you're solid." I exhaled. Hearing that from him helped. I didn't want this to spiral out of control. I wasn't looking to escalate anything. But the HOA clearly had no intention of backing off, and this was the only card I had left to play. Around lunchtime, I gathered the team again in the break room. They were already talking about how bad the parking had gotten, so I didn't waste time. "Tomorrow morning," I told them, "tow trucks will be here at 7 sharp. We're clearing every single unauthorized car from this lot. I want you all to park up the street just for the morning, just in case things get messy. I'll call you when it's safe to bring your cars in." There were a few nods, a couple chuckles, and someone muttered, "About damn time." Emily gave me a small nod from across the room. "You're doing the right thing," she said quietly as the others filtered out. "Even if it doesn't feel good." She was right. It didn't feel good. I didn't enjoy the thought of people waking up and finding their cars gone. I knew there'd be yelling, finger-pointing, drama. But they'd crossed a line and just kept walking. And now I had to hold that line or lose the respect of everyone who counted on me. Not just my employees, but myself. That evening, just before locking up, I walked the lot one more time, soaking in the calm before the storm. The sun was setting low over the trees, casting long shadows across the pavement and the rows of cars that didn't belong. My lot didn't even feel like mine anymore. It felt like a battleground. I stopped near the entrance, looking out across the rows of metal and glass, and muttered under my breath, "Last chance." But I knew they weren't going to take it. They thought I was bluffing, that I'd back down like everyone else. They were about to find out how wrong they were. I was at the warehouse before the sun even broke the horizon. The sky was still dark, that early gray blue before morning really hits. And the air had that stillness you get before a storm rolls in. I parked up the block like I'd told the crew to do and walked the rest of the way in, coffee in one hand, folder of paperwork in the other. The lot was packed again. More cars than yesterday. Some were double parked. One was practically hugging the loading dock like it belonged there. It was like they knew something was coming and decided to squeeze in one last time. But today was different. Today, I wasn't walking the lot to take photos or record proof. I'd already done all that. Today, I was done talking. At 6:58 a.m., the first tow truck rolled in. Then a second, then 2 more. 4 of them, just like the company promised. The lead guy, stocky dude named Ray with a clipboard and zero patience, stepped out and shook my hand like we were gearing up for a military op. "You weren't kidding," he said, glancing at the maze of parked cars. "We've got a long morning ahead. You got everything you need?" I asked, handing over the folder. Inside was everything. Property deed, photos of posted signs, the certified letter I'd sent the HOA, even a diagram I'd marked up showing which areas to prioritize. "You're golden," he said, flipping through it. "We'll start with anything blocking the docks and work our way out." I nodded and stepped back, watching as the crew got to work. Within 10 minutes, the sound of engines, hydraulic lifts, and chains rattling echoed across the lot. One by one, the trucks started removing vehicles, smooth, methodical, no drama. I watched in silence as the first car, a silver sedan with a soccer ball sticker on the bumper, was rolled onto the flatbed. Ray took photos of every tow, marked the time, snapped shots of the signage nearby. These guys weren't amateurs. They knew exactly how to cover their bases, and I was grateful for it. I didn't want this to turn into a circus. I just wanted my lot back. Around 7:30, the neighborhood started waking up. People came out to walk their dogs, get the paper, head to work, and then they saw the tow trucks. It didn't take long before the shouting started. A woman in a pink bathrobe and slippers marched across the lot like she was storming the beaches. "What's going on here? Where's my husband's car?" she snapped at me. "Gone," I said calmly. "This is private property. The HOA had no authority to tell you otherwise. Signs were posted, notices were given. Your car's at the impound lot." Her face twisted. "This is outrageous." He needs that car for work. You can't just tow people without warning. I gave your HOA 2 days notice, I said flatly. They ignored it. I'm not the bad guy here. Talk to them. She muttered something under her breath and stomped off. Within minutes, others started trickling out, some still in pajamas, some dressed for the day, and the scene got louder. People realized their cars were gone and turned their frustration straight at me. Voices raised, fingers pointed, accusations flying. A small crowd gathered near the lot entrance, tension thick in the air. I didn't flinch. I'd prepared for this. I pulled out a stack of flyers I'd printed the night before. Simple sheets with the towing company's contact info, location of the impound lot, and a brief explanation that this was private property and vehicles were removed legally. Emily showed up right on time and helped me hand them out. Don't engage, I told her. Just hand it over and walk away. She nodded and got to work. Despite the yelling and the frustration, the towing continued. Ray's crew didn't stop. By 10 a.m., over 24 cars had been removed. The lot was starting to look like it used to, open, organized, and fully operational. For the first time in weeks, I could see the concrete beneath the chaos. It felt like breathing fresh air after being stuck in a room too long. Just as I was letting myself relax, a familiar voice cut through the noise. "Mr. Miller," came the sharp call. I turned, and there she was, Mrs. Bennett, striding toward me like she owned the pavement. 2 board members followed behind her, both looking more uncomfortable than angry. "What is the meaning of this?" she snapped, eyes blazing. "You had no right to tow our residents' vehicles." I didn't even blink. Actually, I had every right. This is my lot. I gave you notice. I gave you time. You did nothing. So I handled it. Her cheeks flushed deep red. "This is unacceptable. The HOA will not stand for this. We'll pursue legal action if necessary." I crossed my arms. "Go ahead. Everything's documented. Every car, every sign, every step I took. You want to make this legal? Let's do it. But don't pretend I didn't warn you." One of the board members stepped forward, clearly trying to play peacemaker. "Maybe we can work something out here. No need to let things get worse." "There's nothing to work out," I said firmly. "The lot is off limits to your residents, now and always. If I see another unauthorized car here, it gets towed. End of story." Mrs. Bennett opened her mouth like she had more to say, but must have thought better of it. With a dramatic sigh, she turned on her heel and walked off, her entourage right behind her. By noon, the chaos had died down. The crowd dispersed. The shouting stopped. And the lot, empty, peaceful, mine again. For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. The day after the towing felt strangely quiet, almost too quiet. The lot was finally clear, deliveries were back on schedule, and my crew parked without issue. On the surface, it looked like the storm had passed. But I knew better. With people like Mrs. Bennett and her board, silence wasn't surrender, it was planning. Around mid-afternoon, Emily walked into my office holding a plain envelope. "This just came," she said, setting it on my desk. Her voice was low, cautious. I opened it, already expecting something unpleasant, and I wasn't disappointed. A letter, formal and dripping with passive-aggressive phrasing, signed by none other than Mrs. Bennett herself. In it, she accused me of causing emotional and logistical hardship for the neighborhood, disrupting the harmony of the community, and damaging the spirit of cooperation. The real kicker? She demanded I immediately stop all towing operations and enter good faith negotiations to allow continued use of my lot as shared community space. I read it twice just to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. Then I let out a dry laugh and tossed it on the desk. The audacity was almost impressive. Not only were they refusing to take responsibility, they were doubling down. I called Brian right away. "You're gonna love this," I said, reading him the highlights. He chuckled on the other end. "Sounds like textbook HOA bluffing. Do they actually mention legal grounds?" "Not a single one. Just failed threats and fake diplomacy." "Then don't worry," he said. "Let me draft a response. We'll make it clear you acted completely within your rights. Just keep documenting everything. If they pull anything else, we'll be ready." That anything else came faster than either of us expected. The next morning, as I pulled into the warehouse, I noticed something taped to the street light near the entrance. Then another on the stop sign. Another on the mailbox. Flyers. Dozens of them. Each one stamped with the HOA's official logo and titled in big bold letters, "Warning, local business owner endangers community harmony." I tore one down and read it. The thing painted me like a villain, claiming I had unilaterally taken action against the residents, refused to engage in dialogue, and jeopardized neighborhood peace and trust. It ended with a call to action: boycott my business and pressure me into reopening the lot to support community unity. I stood there gripping the flyer, jaw tight, heart pounding. They'd moved from passive threats to a full-on smear campaign. This wasn't about parking anymore. This was personal. I called Emily and told her to collect every flyer she could find. We pulled down over 30. I photographed each one, then emailed them straight to Brian. Can they legally do this? I asked when he called me back. Short answer? No, he said. If they're trying to damage your business or reputation, that's defamation. It's one thing to disagree. It's another to post false claims in public. I'll draft a cease and desist. I spent the rest of that day focused on damage control. I filed a formal complaint with the local city office, outlining everything from the unauthorized parking to the flyers. Then I reached out to a PR consultant a friend had recommended. If this was going public, I wanted to be ahead of it. But before any press coverage, I took one more step. I logged into the HOA's online community forum. It was where residents discussed neighborhood stuff, posted announcements, shared complaints. I knew some people there hated what I'd done, but I also figured plenty had no idea what really happened. I wrote a long, detailed post explaining everything from start to finish. How the HOA had never asked for permission. How I'd given them written notice and posted signs. How they ignored every warning. I attached photos of the lot, the signs, the certified letter, the flyers. I didn't get emotional or angry. I just laid out the facts and let the truth speak for itself. And then I waited. The first responses were predictable: angry residents calling me selfish, accusing me of not caring about the community. But then the tide started to shift. One woman replied, saying she had no idea the HOA had never asked for my consent. Another man backed me up, saying he'd had issues with Mrs. Bennett before. And then a post popped up that really hit me. Jake, I'm a business owner too, it read. They tried the same thing on my property 3 years ago. You're not wrong. They rely on intimidation. Don't back down. His name was Tom Russo. We ended up messaging privately, and within the hour, we were on the phone swapping stories. He told me how they tried to fine him over some fake ordinance and threatened to take him to court. None of it held up, but it drained time and energy. You've got to stay firm, he told me. They count on people folding under pressure. The minute they see you won't, they start to crack. Hearing that gave me a boost. I wasn't alone, and I wasn't crazy for standing my ground. But I also knew this wasn't over. The HOA had tried parking, then pressure, then public shaming. There was no telling what they'd try next. Still, I wasn't scared. I was done reacting. From here on out, I was ready. It was 2 days after the flyers went up when I got the email that changed everything. The subject line was simple: inquiry regarding recent HOA dispute. At first, I figured it was another resident looking to complain, or maybe someone else wanting to argue in my inbox instead of in person. But when I opened it, I saw it was from Rachel Park, a journalist at the local paper. She said she was working on a story about HOA overreach in small communities and had heard about my situation from a neighbor who followed the forum thread. Would you be open to an interview? She wrote. Off the record at first, if that makes you more comfortable. I stared at the screen for a good minute. My gut told me this was risky. But the other part of me, the one that was tired of being painted as the bad guy, knew this might be the chance to flip the narrative. I called Brian, and he didn't hesitate. If she's legit, do it. Be honest. Be measured. This could be the push you need. So I replied and agreed to meet the next day. Rachel showed up to the warehouse lot with a notebook, voice recorder, and a firm handshake. Late 20s, sharp, no-nonsense energy. We sat in the front office, and I told her everything, start to finish. I walked her through the timeline, showed her the emails, the flyers, the photos of the signs. I even let her watch the videos I'd taken of the cars blocking my dock. She listened quietly, asked good questions, and never once tried to spin it. What made you finally decide to tow them? She asked at one point. I looked out the office window at the lot, finally clean again, and answered honestly. Because I got tired of being ignored. I tried to handle it like an adult. Gave them notice. Put up signs. Called. Met with them. They just kept walking over me like my business didn't matter. At some point, you either let it happen or you take your lot back. She nodded and jotted something down. Then she asked the question I'd been expecting. Do you regret it? I paused for a second, but the answer came easy. No. I don't enjoy conflict, But I'm not going to apologize for defending what's mine. I've got employees. I've got trucks. I've got a business to run. They weren't just borrowing space. They were interfering with my livelihood. I did what I had to do. Rachel stayed for almost an hour. When she left, she thanked me and said the article would likely run early next week. I didn't think much of it. Figured it would be a short column, maybe a mention on a local news site. What I didn't expect was how quickly it spread. 3 days later, the article was front and center on the paper's homepage. Warehouse owner pushes back against HOA overreach and growing parking battle. It had everything: photos of the lot, quotes from our interview, even a side-by-side of my posted signs in the HOA's flyers. Rachel had done her homework, and people noticed. The comments section blew up. Emails started rolling in. Local business owners, property managers, even some lawyers sent notes of support. A few folks shared their own HOA horror stories, some worse than mine. For the first time in weeks, it felt like the tide was turning. I wasn't the villain in their story anymore. I was the guy who finally said no. That afternoon, Emily popped her head into my office. "You're kind of famous," she said with a grin, holding up her phone. "You've got like 400 comments on the article already. How many are calling me a menace to the community?" I joked. "Only a few. The rest are cheering you on." And she was right. Even the forum thread on the HOA site had shifted. People were questioning the board, demanding transparency, asking why they were never told the parking lot wasn't actually part of the neighborhood. One guy posted, "Why are we fighting a guy who owns his property and runs a business? That's not community, that's theft." That one stuck with me, because it wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every person who'd ever had an HOA step a little too far over the line and expected them to just smile and take it. That night, I went for a walk through the lot. No cars, no flyers, just space, open, quiet, mine. I stood there with my hands in my pockets, watching the sun dip behind the treetops, and felt something I hadn't felt in weeks: peace. Maybe the fight wasn't fully over. Maybe Mrs. Bennett had one more letter up her sleeve. But I had the truth on my side, and now the community knew it too. And that made all the difference. The invitation to the HOA board meeting came in an official envelope, complete with the association's embossed logo and a stiff little note. "We invite you to attend the next board session to discuss recent events and clarify your position." Clarify my position? That part almost made me laugh. Still, Brian told me to go. "It's not just about defending yourself anymore," he said. "It's about putting this all on record and letting them know you're not backing down, not ever again." So I showed up early that Thursday night, dressed business casual, folder in hand, calm on the outside but tight-wired inside. The meeting was held in the community center just past the neighborhood gates, a place that looked more like a country club lobby than a place where anyone got held accountable. But that night, something felt different. The room was packed. Rows of chairs filled with residents, some fidgeting, some whispering, a few with arms folded and brows furrowed like they'd already made up their minds. At the front, Mrs. Bennett sat center stage behind a long table with her board, looking composed but tense. She barely acknowledged me as I walked in. I nodded once, then found a seat near the front and waited. The first part of the meeting dragged: budget reports, landscaping updates, a brief discussion about mailbox vandalism. But when the parking dispute came up, the air changed. Mrs. Bennett cleared her throat and launched into a speech, reading from a printed statement that framed the HOA's decision to use my lot as a community necessity during exceptional parking strain. She painted herself as the peacemaker, claiming that towing the cars had created discord and damaged trust. When she was done, the moderator opened the floor to responses. I stood up. My hands weren't shaking, but my jaw was set tight. I looked out at the sea of faces, some familiar, most not, and I took a breath. "I wasn't going to speak tonight," I began. "But since we're talking about trust, let's lay everything out." I reached into my folder and pulled out the certified letter. I sent this to the HOA before I took any action. I gave them 48 hours to notify residents and vacate the lot. They ignored it. I held up a photo of the posted signs. These went up the same day. Clear, legal warnings. Not one was respected. Murmurs started to ripple through the crowd. I didn't stop. I own that property. It's my business, my team's livelihood. I pay taxes on it, I insure it, I maintain it. And for weeks, I couldn't even use it, not because of an emergency, but because the HOA decided, without asking, that it was theirs to give away. Mrs. Bennett tried to interrupt, but I raised my voice just enough. This was never about parking. It was about respect. I tried to solve it privately. I met with Mrs. Bennett. I called. I warned. And when that didn't work, I enforced my rights, legally, calmly, and with documentation. The flyers? The smear campaign? That wasn't about unity. That was about control. I paused and looked directly at her. And it ends now. The room went silent. Then a hand shot up. An older man in a plaid shirt stood slowly. "We were never told the lot wasn't part of the community," he said, voice flat with disbelief. "We were led to believe we had permission." A younger woman followed. "Why didn't you inform us before cars got towed? We had no clue any of this was going on." I nodded. "Because your board didn't tell you." I asked them to. Repeatedly. They chose silence over honesty. More hands. More questions. And suddenly, the room wasn't angry at me anymore. They were angry at the board. One man, sharp and direct, turned toward the table. "This isn't the first time you've acted without transparency," he said. "It's the first time someone's pushed back hard enough to show it." Mrs. Bennett's face had gone pale. She opened her mouth again, but the moderator stepped in. "Let's keep this respectful," he said, though even his tone had shifted. When the floor closed, the energy in the room had completely flipped. The board wasn't just under pressure, they were cornered. And I didn't need to say another word. I stepped outside while the meeting wrapped up, not needing to hear the vote discussions or community motions. I already knew which way things were going. As people filed out, a few stopped to thank me. One man shook my hand. A woman clapped me on the shoulder. "We needed someone to call this out," she said. "You did good." I gave a quiet nod. For the first time in this entire mess, I didn't feel like I was standing alone. It came 3 days later, an email with a subject line so simple, so sterile, that I almost missed the weight behind it. Leadership change, HOA board announcement. I opened it expecting spin, maybe a vague promise of improvement, but there it was in the first sentence. Mrs. Bennett had officially resigned as president of the Homeowners Association. Effective immediately. The message was polite, professional, probably rewritten a dozen times by someone who didn't want to admit why it happened. But everyone in that neighborhood knew. The pressure from the community, the questions piling up, the public story that wouldn't go away, it was too much. She stepped down because she had no choice. And with her exit came something I never thought I'd see, a formal apology. Not from her, but from one of the remaining board members. A clean, direct email that acknowledged the HOA's mishandling of the parking situation, the lack of transparency, and the harm it had caused, not just to me, but to the residents they were supposed to represent. They said they were revising their policies to prevent anything like this from happening again. That they'd be holding a vote for new leadership. That they were committed to rebuilding trust. I read it twice, let it sink in, and leaned back in my chair. For a long time, I didn't say anything. No victory lap. No fist pump. Just silence. Because after all the shouting, the legal letters, the towing trucks, the flyers and meetings and late nights on the phone with Brian, this was it. This was how it ended. Quiet. Clean. Not with cheers, but with change. I stepped outside the office, walked the edge of the lot like I had 100 times before. The lines were still bright from when I had them repainted. No cars but ours. No chaos. No flyers on the poles or strangers yelling across the asphalt. Just space. Just normal. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like peace. Emily came out to meet me, holding her coffee, her expression soft. "It's over, huh?" "Yeah," I said, exhaling. "It is." She smiled and nudged my shoulder. "Took long enough." I smiled back, but part of me still felt the echo of it all. This ordeal had stretched out longer than it ever should have. But it had shown me something important, how fragile boundaries can be when people think they know better, and how critical it is to stand up when those lines get crossed. I'd never wanted a fight, but I hadn't run from one either. And in the end, I didn't just get my lot back. I got the truth out in the open. The HOA wasn't invincible. They'd made a mistake, and this time, they were held accountable. I knew I might always be that guy to a few residents, the one who made a scene, who brought in the tow trucks, who didn't play nice. And I was okay with that. Because to everyone who'd ever had their voice ignored, their space invaded, or their patience tested by people in power, I hope this story meant something. That drawing the line doesn't make you a villain. Sometimes, it makes you the only one willing to do the right thing. As I walked back toward the warehouse, the sun hit just right over the concrete, casting long shadows behind me but lighting the path ahead. The lot was still. My team was busy inside. Business was good. And finally, everything was back where it belonged. Weeks passed. The flyers were gone, the board had new leadership, and no one parked in my lot without permission anymore. You'd never guess there'd been a battle here, a real one, loud and public, that reached from my warehouse pavement all the way into courtrooms and comment threads. But even with everything back in order, the experience lingered. Not in a bad way, not like a wound, but like a scar you don't regret. Something you carry because it means you got through it. I still found myself walking the edges of the lot some mornings, coffee in hand, just making rounds like I used to. Not because I was worried anymore, but because the habit had become something else, something symbolic. This place, these lines, this space I built with my own hands and years of sweat, had been taken for granted. And now it meant more than ever. It stood for more than parking. It stood for principle. I used to think standing your ground meant being stubborn, but now I know better. It means being steady when everything around you wants you to cave. It means drawing a line, not because you're trying to be difficult, but because someone has to say enough when the boundary gets crossed. And maybe the biggest thing I learned? Most people don't actually want to be the one who says it. They want the conflict handled, but they don't want to be the one holding the line. That's not weakness. That's just human. But sometimes, someone's got to take the heat. And this time, it was me. I won't pretend it didn't come with stress. There were nights I didn't sleep. Moments I doubted myself. I had people shouting at me in the street, sending me anonymous messages, twisting the story to make it look like I was the problem. But the truth had my back. So did the law. And more importantly, so did a few good people who saw the bigger picture and weren't afraid to speak up once the facts came to light. I didn't fight because I wanted to win. I fought because I refused to be walked over. And in the end, it made a difference. Not just for me, but for the community too, even the ones who will never admit it. These days, business is solid. Deliveries come and go on time. My team's in good spirits. The lot is quiet, just how it should be. But every so often, I'll see a car slow down near the entrance, maybe someone from the neighborhood who remembers. They glance in, hesitate for a second, and then keep driving. And I can't lie, every time that happens, I smile just a little. Because they know now. They know there are lines you don't cross. And when you do, there's someone on the other side willing to push back.